around whether the way we treat drugs should be legalized. At the same time, of course, the international lockdown, the way that international transport networks have been disrupted, has also disrupted the international drugs trade. MJ Stowe is from the South African network of people who use drugs. MJ, good afternoon to you. There might be a little bit of excitement about the name of your organization. I have to ask exactly what does your network do?
Hi, good afternoon, Stephen. So the South African network of people who use drugs is really there to advocate for the most marginalized, for people who use drugs. And we're really there to ensure that challenges and issues facing people who use drugs are heard.
Okay, so people who use drugs are being represented in these conversations. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
And by drugs, you mean drugs like cocaine?
Well, we also try change the narrative and really help people understand that, drugs are a variety of different substances, and whether it's heroin or whether it's cocaine, each of them come with their own risks and their own benefits.
Okay. There's been a huge lockdown here and around the world. That must have really disrupted the international drugs trade, the way they move around. That must have had a big impact on people here in all sorts of ways. Now, it may seem, from one viewpoint to just say, well, good, people can't get their supply of what is illegal anyway. But I imagine there are unintended consequences to that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's quite a cruel approach. I think you really want to look at drugs as from a person-centered approach and really see the person behind the substance and not just look at the substance and see how it's, impacting people around the world.
So what impact has there been as a result of these disruptions to sort of drugs trafficking networks? Have people had to substitute what they use?
Yeah, so we've done some research last year, and over a short period of time, we did see some disruptions. So, for example, decreases in sales of methamphetamine and heroin, but that was only for a short period of time. If we look at the drug markets now, we can see that trade is continuing, and most of the drug markets are almost back to normal.
Some drugs would have been affected more than others. So, for example, opiates often, sometimes what happens in Afghanistan can affect the price of something on what we used to call the South African street. What happens in South America or American drugs policy, we're going to come to American drugs policy in a moment, but will actually have a big impact everywhere around the world. They're knock-on effects in all sorts of ways.
Yes, absolutely. And what we saw was that, with disruptions to the drug markets, often the people who feel the effects the most are the people who use drugs on the ground.
In the US, there's been what American politicians call the war on drugs, and I think, well, almost every serious academic I've spoken to about this will say that it's failed. Some American politicians are brave enough to say that it's failed too. Do you believe that criminalizing drugs is the right approach? Should we change the way that we deal with this in South Africa, follow maybe more of a Dutch model?
Absolutely. I think we definitely need to change our approach. If we look at the war on drugs, I would actually say it's been a massive success because it's achieving what it was set out to do, and that's really disenfranchise the most marginalized people of color and racial and ethnic minorities.
MJ Stowe, thanks very much indeed from the SA network of people who use drugs. I really appreciate the time. Well, this is a completely separate conversation.